Brought to you by PrayLatin.com, makers of prayer cards featuring complete English phonetic renderings of Latin pronunciations. There's always a hazard when reporting on the prophecies alleged to have been given by Padre Pio. It is well known that Padre Pio himself rejected any claims to making prophecy. He had been asked if he ever made a 3 Days of Darkness prophecy himself, and later he said in response flat out that he never made such a prophecy. I even have a recording of that alleged prophecy on this channel, and I've opted to keep it up, not because of, any click reasons, but because I own my mistakes and figure I should just leave it there. Maybe I should change the title of it, though. I'll let you decide. Let me know in the comments. But this prophecy from Padre Pio isn't really a prophecy, although he does prophesize in it to a degree. If that sounds like a contradiction, you'll understand as we get to this topic here. The topic is the third secret of Fatima. Here we have, from an unimpeachable source, that Padre Pio did in fact have some rather startling things to say about the consecration as offered by Pius XII in the 1940s, and then later that this same source, based off of the things Padre Pio said, was present when John Paul II offered his consecrations, and this unimpeachable source said they did not fulfill the requests of Fatima. And who was that unimpeachable source? Father Gabriel Amorth. See, Father Amorth was the Vatican exorcist for a very long time, and unfortunately a movie was made about him that has very little to do with reality, although I hear the movie is pretty entertaining if you are inclined to such, though I cannot guarantee whether it's suitable for Christian ears or not. But Father Amorth is an unimpeachable source on this, and he had a conversation with Padre Pio in about 1960, give or take, about what was coming in the church. And here, this is based off of an old article that Steve Skojec wrote over at 1 Peter 5, and despite his the things that has happened to him since, at the time, this was excellent research he had done on this. So I'll have a link to the article in my show notes at returntotradition.org. And it's worth your looking at. So we're going to go over the two sections he has from Father Gabriel Amorth, one directly about Padre Pio, about the contents of the third secret of Fatima. And what you're going to find is that Padre Pio believed the third secret detailed an apostasy in the church. And that is why John the 23rd refused to have it read publicly. He did not refuse it, or he did not release it in 1960 as heaven requested, saying it did not concern their time. Why? Because he feared people would think he was an anti-pope. Yes, I can already imagine the responses from sedevacantists. Here is what Father Gabriel Amorth had to say about Padre Pio and the third secret of Fatima. A piece of the Fatima puzzle came in the form of an interview with the very famous and now deceased Roman exorcist, Father Gabriel Amorth, also conducted by Jose Maria Zavala. Father Amorth personally knew St. Padre Pio for 26 years, and it is from this towering figure of 20th century Catholic sanctity that he claims to have learned the contents of the third secret of Fatima. Father Amorth was interviewed by the Zavala in 2011, who kept the interview secret until after the Exorcist's passing, publishing it for the first time in his book about Fatima. In the interview, Father Amorth relates, as he has done elsewhere, that he does not believe the consecration of the world by Pope John Paul II in 1984 was sufficient to satisfy the requirements set forth by Our Lady. There was no such consecration then, says Father Amorth. I witnessed the act. I was in St. Peter's Square that Sunday afternoon, very close to the Pope, so close I could almost touch him. Pressed by Zavala as to why he so forcefully believes that the consecration was not done, Father Amorth replied, very simple. John Paul II wanted to mention that country expressly, but in the end, he did not. Zavala pressed the issue with Father Amorth, saying that Sister Lucia herself, as mentioned above, had said that heaven had accepted the consecration. He describes an incredulous reaction from Father Amorth. Lucia said that, he asked. Zavala continues. Well, Cardinal Tarcisio Bertone said it in the year 2000, hiding behind a letter from Lucia dated November 1989, in which she stated that heaven had admitted consecration in spite of one of the most important conditions. Have you seen that letter, he asks, as if conducting a police interrogation in search of evidence. Never, I say flatly. I do not think you'll ever see it because I'm convinced that Lucia did not write it. How are you so sure of that? Why didn't Bertone show it when he should have, when he announced the third secret of Fatima? A simple photocopy of the manuscript included in the official dossier of the Vatican would have been sufficient to dispel any doubt. If the Vatican has always been scrupulous in providing the documentary proof that authenticated the information by Lucia on minor matters, what reason would they have to skimp on the only documentary evidence that, according to Bertone, validated a fact that without doubt was of as much importance as the consecration performed by John Paul II? Yes, it is weird, I admit. You really think Lucia took 5 years to write that the consecration had been truly accepted, and that Bertone waited no less than 16 years to announce the validity of something so crucial as the consecration of that country in question to the Immaculate Heart of Mary? Father Amorth's voice sounds like dry leaves. It's all very strange in truth, I, Zavala, nod again. Moreover, he Amorth adds, if the consecration of the world to the Immaculate Heart of Mary made by Pius XII in 1942 was only partially accepted, because he did not specifically mention the country in question, for Jesus said that in view of the war would only be shortened rather than finished immediately, why would he now change his mind with John Paul II if that country was not mentioned on this occasion? It would be an incongruity, yes. Rather. So, I have no doubt that the consecration did not occur on the terms required by the Virgin, but we must not lose sight of what she herself wanted to tell us through Lucia. In the end, my Immaculate Heart will triumph. The Holy Father will consecrate that country to me, and it will come to be, granting itself to the world a piece of time. The interview then digresses here from the topic of Fatima, but he does return to it. But I want to point out something here. There's also an implication in this. And the implication in what you just heard was that the cardinal who released that alleged third secret fabricated it. That's not real. Think about that for a second. That's the implication, because if he was willing to make up that Sister Lucia said that heaven accepted this, then there's an implication that the third secret that they released was also just made up because the same people were involved. There's also a further implication. For those of you who have at least some interest in the fake Sister Lucia hypothesis, which seems to be more than a hypothesis if you've been following the work of Dr. C over on his YouTube channel and on his website, it lends credence to that as well. Because if they're willing to lie about the third secret, what else are they willing to lie about? And what else have they been willing to do? I don't know if I go as far as Dr. Hosnowski when he talks about Paul VI and John Paul II being implicated in the things that are alleged to have happened to Sister Lucia. But his evidence is becoming hard to dismiss. It really, really is. But there is more to this. The interviewer returns to the topic, and here's what he says. Forgive me for insisting on the third secret of Fatima. Did Padre Pio relate it, then, to the loss of faith within the Church? Father Gabriel furrows his brow and sticks out his chin. He seems very affected. Indeed, he states, one day Padre Pio said to me very sorrowfully, "You know, Gabriel, it is Satan who has been introduced into the bosom of the Church, and within a very short time will come to rule a false church." Oh my, some kind of Antichrist. When did he prophesy this to you? I, Zavala, ask. It must have been about 1960, since I was already a priest then. Was that why John the 23rd had such a panic about publishing the third secret of Fatima, so that the people wouldn't think that he was the anti-pope or whatever it was? A slight but knowing smile curls the lips of Father Amorth. Did Padre Pio say anything else to you about future catastrophes, earthquakes, floods, wars, afflictions, hunger? Did he allude to the same things prophesied in Holy Scripture? Nothing of the sort mattered to him, however fearful they proved to be, except for the great apostasy within the Church. This was the issue that really tormented him, and for which he prayed and offered a great part of his suffering, crucified out of love. The third secret of Fatima? Exactly. Is there any way to avoid something so terrible, Father Gabriel? There is hope, but it is useless if it is not accompanied by works. Let us begin by fulfilling the consecration of that country to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. Let us recite the Holy Rosary. Let us all do prayer and penance. And then there's one more part to this. Here again, Father Amorth talks about how he did not believe the consecration had been done. And this was in 2015 that he said this final part here. The consecration has not yet been made. I was there on March 25th, 1984 in St. Peter's Square. I was in the front row, practically within touching distance of the Holy Father. Pope John Paul II wanted to consecrate that country, but his entourage did not, fearing that the Orthodox would be antagonized, and they almost thwarted him. Therefore, when His Holiness consecrated the world on his knees, he added a sentence not included in the distributed version that instead said to consecrate especially those nations in which you yourself have asked for their consecration. So indirectly, this included that country. However, specific consecration has not yet been made. You can always do it. Indeed, it will certainly be done. I want to add one other thought here. Most Fatima observers don't think that Francis's consecrations did the job either, even though they specifically named that country. And why? Because he added other things to it. The whole world and the other country they're involved in a conflict with. You may think, so what? But there's blessings in the Old Testament where people went even a step beyond what God asked for, and it turned out to either be a disaster for them or it didn't fulfill the requirements asked of them. Plenty of them. Well, in the comments, put a few of them if you can think of some. I trust the biblical scholarship of this audience here. Put a few in there, but one that comes to mind is Moses striking the rock with his staff. He's told to strike it twice, he strikes it 3 times. And because he did that, he was not allowed to enter the Promised Land. There are other examples, though, in the Bible, so put them in the comments if you know of them. That may sound like harsh legalism to you, but again, we have scriptural backing for it. Why is it so hard for the popes to do the consecration the simplest way? Have a Holy Mass. Have the Pope at the beginning approach the altar, say a prayer of consecration with only names that one country. That's it. Offer the Mass for the consecration. At the homily, read the third secret, because that's part of it. He does have to read it and make it public, and then finish the Mass. And then command every single bishop in the world to offer a Mass at that same time, or at least that same day with him, on pain of excommunication. It'll take care of the problem. But for some reason, it's the hardest thing for them to do. And my suspicion is that it's because, and has been for a long time, that the third secret is about an apostasy in the church, led from the top. We have cardinals saying as much. We have priests and former priests who claim to have been in the room when the third secret was read at various times, saying it was. Most tellingly, Malachi Martin saying that being on the Art Bell show once and somebody called in reading off the most Hollywood-type apocalyptic scenario you could imagine, and Malachi Martin at the end saying, no, it's way worse than that. And Art Bell flabbergasted, not able to tell, couldn't understand what could be worse than what they just heard. And Malachi Martin couldn't tell you. And that's because Art Bell saw things for the most part through a materialist lens. The most horrifying thought is that souls would be led to perdition by men in the church. And from the very top. It's a hard pill to swallow. Probably sounded like something out of just a bad Dan Brown novel. Until the last few years. And then all of a sudden it started to make sense, didn't it? Let me know what you think of this in the comments, please. Hit like and subscribe if you haven't. It does help. So to sharing this on social media, that helps too. And as always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.